Hey guys, welcome back to day 3 of THU TV. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far. My name is Nichols, and I'm hosting a series of talks this afternoon based on technology and creativity. Later this evening, we'll have Ahaya, who'll be talking about some business and education. And it's a great series of talks. Please leave your comments, let us know what you think, and tell us what you'd like to hear more of. Also want to remind you to go to trojan-unicorn.com/TV and subscribe to get all of the video on demand content. It's a really great deal, and you'll get all the talks that are allowed to show, and you'll be able to download those all onto and see anything that you may have missed. If you're a THU attendee, you can get that then or whatever. Today I'm joined by Keely and Jeff, good friends of mine. Jeff and I have known each other for about 16 years.
Yeah, about that, yeah.
And believe it or not, Keely and I have known each other for about 20 years, but we didn't realize it.
This is true.
Because you were a student of mine at Rice University.
Yes. This is many years ago.
Many years ago. But the reason I wanted to bring you guys on is specifically to talk about architecture. And this happened last year. Jeff came on to this to THU and inspired us to do something. So Jeff, why don't you tell us the story about why you came to THU last year and then how this conversation happened?
Yeah. So, I go to a ton of events, but always generally within our own industry, in the architectural biz industry, but I'd heard so many
But also you go to SIGGRAPH and
yeah, of course. There were sort of crossover events as well,
right.
But, I knew you were coming to this event, and I think there's one or two others that I knew, and I was hearing really good things, and to be honest, I don't come from the concept art and, the VFX and game side, but I was interested in why this event was so successful, because it was really rarely hugely successful. So I came, and the first couple of days I was like, wow, this is interesting, and by day 3 or 4, I completely drank the Kool-Aid, and I'm complete tribe member now.
Right.
I came back this year just because I was so inspired. honestly, in 21 years of going to events, this was the most inspiring event, hands down, I've ever been to.
Right, I agree, and I remember you were, for day 1 when you came here and you says, Chris, you have a lot to live up to, because you talk about this like it's the most amazing thing ever, and you says you have a lot to live up to. It's like, I am fully confident that you're going to enjoy this, and not that I've oversold it at all. Yeah. And I think hopefully I did. The thing is that you really have to experience it to understand it. But one of the big conversations we had was about architecture. And architecture visualization, and how that field, which Keely is involved in as well, and we'll get to Keely and why she's here, but that field specifically lacks inspiration. Yeah. It's mostly focused on technology and about your settings and tutorials or whatever. There's no real feeling of inspiration that this event brings. And so you put out something on Facebook about it during the event to specifically address that.
Yeah, our industry kind of is born of technology, even though there are a lot of artists and they come from an architectural background.
Right.
It's interesting. We focus almost exclusively online on the technology side, and we rarely talk about the artistic side. So,
right.
I had been here for 3 or 4 days, I guess, and I had been seeing all these really inspirational artistic talks, and then I had gone to one of the more technical talks here, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like this, the contrast, and it was like, wow. And I had made a post because it was almost an emotional experience when I hit it, and I commented on how our industry really needs to focus on the core of why we do what we do.
Right.
No client comes to us and goes, oh, SIGGRAPH does the best ambient occlusion shader in architecture, so that's why we hire them.
Yes.
Right?
No one hired SIGGRAPH because they're ambient occlusion.
Right. So I was like, why? Why do we not talk about why we actually exist? So it was.
Well, to make the long story short, basically we convinced Andre that we want to do this. We want to bring architecture here. We want to bring the subject of architecture. And so we brought Keely, who's an amazing person. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Keely.
Well, I'm an architectural visualization artist now, and I was an architect, and then a visual effects artist.
So you did it. Your talk yesterday was amazing because you had all this meandering path.
Yeah.
You dropped out of school a couple times.
A couple times.
Listen, dropping out of school is fine if you're successful, and you are. So I wouldn't worry about it. But you went obviously you worked for One Cool House. You went to work for Bruce Mouse. So you were talking architecture, graphic design. And then you went to work and do some previs over at PLF, which is a fantastic company.
Yeah. awesome.
So tell us a little bit about how that happened and why your decision to go. What I'm curious is that decision to go from PLF and start your own art-based company.
Well, I think like a lot of things when you're in a creative field, a lot of decisions aren't necessarily deliberate. Mm-hmm. So you are enjoying creating, and I think that's what this conference is about. Right. And you search for different ways to express what it is that you're interested in. And for me, it was always about how to get back to the sort of essential idea of what architecture is to me. Right. So it's somewhat personal. And I was really motivated by everything that visual effects does to engage people, to excite them, and how we could bring some of that to architectural visualization, which at the time was relatively new. Yeah. So, and Lon, I know you guys have that story about the animation, the animated path, the cart. Oh, yeah. And I think that's very true. So how can you bring excitement to architectural animation? And I felt like there was something there. And where do you think that your time over at PLF really helped you, like, for example, with cameras, obviously? Massive. Right? Just massively. Right. I learned kind of everything that I know. I think as you guys both mentioned, it's a tech-first field in a lot of ways. And, I mean, things about pipeline, even the proper way to set up a scene, it all began for me there. Right. And I think some of those lessons of large visual effects studios carry over to what we're doing. And it's a relatively new field, in architectural visualization. So there's a lot we can learn from everything. Right. I think you're right. I think it's really cool that field helped you with your art-based concept. But do you feel that the architecture visualization, or even just the concept of architecture, pure architecture, not just I like buildings, yeah, sure, really help the concept artists and the designers that are doing stuff here? I absolutely do. Right. And I've been very fortunate to have a number of conversations with these amazing artists, and some of them work on characters, which is outside of my experience and I'm fascinated by. But many of them will admit, I draw on a white background where I'm not necessarily thinking about what this character is doing. And there are also a lot of talented environment designers, but I think there's definitely something that the observation of what happens to you when you're in a space can help with motivation of characters, and perhaps with even the way that they're conceived. I'm almost thinking, because of we all have architecture really well, right? But people draw environments, people draw buildings, people draw stuff, but no one's looking at Corbusier as an inspiration of a building when you're doing concept art. No one's looking at Mies van der Rohe or even Koolhaas or Jean Vidal or anything. Those are incredible pieces of architecture that I think could serve the community more, because it seems like that just sort of stays within the architect's portfolio. Well, I think that's a really interesting point, because when you look at, for instance, actual filmmaking, live filmmaking, there are so many significant buildings that are used, particularly in Los Angeles. I think Morphosis is a great example. Right. Caltrans building. Yeah. Even The Cell was filmed at the high school, Diamond Ridge. And in a sense, that's something that filmmakers know. You need this great environment because it motivates actions and it motivates sequences. But I feel as though somehow in visual effects at some point, maybe it's not completely, or even in games, I think right now games, it's something that's being discovered more, that the environment is so crucial, and that maybe we can look to architecture. Yeah, I think that we have that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to do this year, and you and I were talking about it, about coming to THU, is trying to bring that message here, try to see what we can do. But what's also cool is that there's been, about 100 or so people from the architecture field that we can do, something like that. Yeah. It's interesting because we spoke about this last year, but we wanted to get the people at the top of our industry who really appreciate the cross-pollination between different 3D fields and artistic fields, and have them come here. And I don't think I've spoken to one yet this year who hasn't been absolutely blown away. So I think mission accomplished in that sense. Yeah, we've had a lot of very positive feedback, which is great. So hopefully this will. I've been telling them, it's like, great, spread the word, let people know about this, because I think we can have a lot of great conversations with those people. And again, I think that we should find a way that we can engage other people to do things, right? So what do you guys think about the role of the ArcViz community? What has changed in the ArcViz community that sort of made it a little bit more stale, besides just talking about technology?
I mean, I would say certainly the industry started very stale. I mean, I think because most of the people in the industry were technicians, and as you know, the technology matured and people kind of got past the novelty of the technology. Right. So the conversation has happened, you know, for the last 10 years. But I think once people got past that, and it was then about the creativity, we started to see the kind of upward trajectory of that. And now I think the top people in our industry are very much about, you know, how do you evoke an emotion, you know, convey a story within an image or a film, and it's not about the technology. I mean, certainly for now we're bound by those technologies as a tool, but you know, I think the people that came to THU, they fully understand
I was talking to Pedro yesterday, and he was definitely like, his work is inspired by matte painting, right? So he does more of a matte painting than he does an actual rendering. But I think you and I talked about a couple of years ago, Jeff, about the fact that photorealistic rendering is almost a solved problem, right? Yeah. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. It's not like my thing looks really real. It's like, no, it's going to look real. It can pretty much look real out of the box.
I think we're going into like an opposite direction of that now. I think, you know, there's a place for photoreal, right? But I think a lot of the work that we're seeing that is the kind of the top of our industry is this stuff that is hand painted, matte painted.
But even your work you've got a style to your Killigraph's work. It's not about photorealism in the same way at all.
It's not, but we're doing some more photorealism, and I think I actually watched a talk that Daniel Flood gave a couple of years ago, who is the owner of Flood Slicer in Australia, and he had some really interesting points about, you know, how we're pursuing photorealism maybe to the detriment, but there's something else that we do that it's interesting to observe. It's the way some of these artists talk about their work. We are mostly architects, or at least we've dealt in the creation of an environment for so long, that the way that we stage a scene, the way that we art direct, is very unique to architectural visualization. So we're able to conceive of an entire story, and if that happens to be articulated in a photorealistic way, that's fine. But we understand completely the story that sort of scenography conveys, and I think there's a role there, because a lot of people need to see what something's going to be.
Right. I feel like that probably goes back to the roots of architecture, because in its essence, architecture is about experiencing a space, and if you understand how to design something that evokes emotion in a physical space, then you can do that in an image as well.
Exactly.
But don't you think it's interesting? Let's talk about the actual story, right? The story of architecture, or how when you were in architecture, how do you tell a story? I was very obsessed with the concept of narrative in architecture. When I was in architecture school, I thought that's what I wanted to talk about. But the narrative that happens when you look at architecture is very different, right? It's not linear. No. It's sort of ambient in a way, right? And so when you in architecture school or working for an architecture office and you're designing something, you have to present that.
Yes.
Right? So when you present that, you're telling a story.
Yes.
And so that concept of architecture narrative is very different. So what are your thoughts on architecture narrative?
Well, I think, I saw an interesting talk a couple of days ago that Luger gave. And he had a whole concept of spatial narrative, and I felt like that's it. I mean, that's the way that we think about architecture. We sometimes try to force these linear narratives into what we're doing, when in reality we're thinking all around us all the time, and that goes back to this idea that VR is the kind of perfect medium for the way that we think of space.
You're already going exactly where I'm going.
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
Exactly you just jumped right in there. No, I was gonna control the conversation, but you can do it now. No, it's fine. No, you're right, because VR is that's my point is that basically filmmaking right, is a third-person experience, and architecture is a first-person experience.
Yes.
And so VR is a first-person experience, but the problem is people are just. What Luger was telling me, and I was talking about it with him over at the Oasis yesterday. We hung out for a while. He's such a cool guy. But he was telling me, he's like, people are just looking at VR and thinking it's an extension of 3D film. It's like, and he says that's completely the wrong thing. So you're right, spatial narrative, right? So that's architecture.
It is.
And in VR, you pretty much should be looking at architecture, not just some random stuff with some characters in it.
It can be motivated. I think we have a super talented team in our office who are developing our VR, and they're really enthusiastic. And they have a lot of ideas around how you're motivated in a space, how the interaction happens,
right,
and the feedback that you might get. And I think there's some really exciting stuff going on there that's completely related to what we're all doing. Even those of us who are perhaps practicing architectural visualization is more of a high art form, the artists. And in this conference, we talked about this today when we were having coffee, you can almost replace the word artist with entrepreneur. Or architect. It's also relevant.
Right. I think it's really great because Scott and Andre and I did my first interview with them at the opening day, and they came over here and they said that they did not think of architecture as relevant to this conference until I convinced them as such. That's what happened, right? So we convinced them to do that. They said it's not necessarily relevant, and then you convinced us, and then that's where they decided it's not about concept art. It's about experiences. And it's about creativity, and we all have a role to play, and we can all contribute together. So I think that's important. What are some of your another secret thing that architects tend to have is they're complete movie buffs in a lot of ways. What are some of your favorite movies that have inspired you in architecture?
Well, I mean, I hate to be predictable with Blade Runner, so like massively. I go to that Bradbury building frequently. I think when I was in school, it was all about Tarkovsky. Just different ways of looking at how drama is laid out, sort of cinematography, and different ways that can be shot. I mean, you can really find it in anything.
Right.
It's
But I also thought it was really interesting. It was part of your presentation yesterday. You talked about watching Minority Report.
Oh, yeah.
Tell your Minority Report story.
I mean, I don't know if it's the best film out there. But
no, but it made you realize something.
It did. It really made me realize that there's this role for architecture as conceiving of the future of cities,
right? And
then that can be articulated in such an incredibly visual way. And finding out the story of Minority Report, how they had futurists actually consulting on that film, on what the future of highways would look like and transportation. And it comes through.
Right.
But it was a really huge aha moment that, we can do this too. Mm-hmm. We can make something come to life.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, I just, when I used to, when I was in architecture school, I loved the Italian futurists architecture, right? They're amazing. They look like things that would go in a sci-fi film, even though they were designed in the 1920s.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So there's a lot of interesting ideas that go on there and a lot of influences. Actually, one of my favorite architectural influence films are the Jacques Tati films.
Oh, yes. We're just sending those around in the studio to each other.
They're so funny.
So awesome. Beautiful.
So funny. Have you ever seen these films? They basically make fun of...
Yeah.
They basically make fun of modernism, like modernist architecture to like the extreme.
Yep.
And these very...
Playtime is my favorite.
Playtime is really funny. So, But there is influences as well. And I want to bring up a controversial one because you also brought up 12 Monkeys.
Yes, and I showed the picture, but I didn't say anything.
You didn't say... Why didn't you say anything about it?
I think, I talked to my husband, who's an architect, and he was like, maybe just don't say that.
So do it on the live broadcast.
Yeah, I'll do it on the live
broadcast.
Lebbeus Woods, who was a very, very talented architect, illustrator,
right,
had done a drawing of had done a scene, and it was so
He
inspirational.
does architectural illustration.
Yes, he does
and he does a lot of very futuristic looking illustrations of things that are amazing. So look up Lebbeus Woods. Yeah.
Yes, and he's a big inspiration for a lot of architects that we love.
Right.
And Terry Gilliam, I guess, was also a big fan. And I hope I don't get sued or anything. No, it already happened.
It already happened. Everyone's talked about it.
Okay. And so he basically ripped off exactly the drawing, and I showed it in the lecture. It's even the framing is exactly the same.
So
with
it's
the chair.
the chair that's elevated, and then he's in the chair that's elevated. It's the same framing, same chair.
Exactly the same. And then the way it rolled out was that that he sued Universal.
There was a settlement. There was a settlement that happened.
And he decided to not.
And he didn't know about it until he just went to the movies to see this movie, and he
Right.
says, "What the hell? That's my drawing."
And when there's a lot of discussion about whether it was deliberate that he wanted it to be out there in the world, instead of having them take it out, because he had the right to say cut that out of the film.
Right.
But he said leave it. Maybe he just wanted to.
Well, it's not fair, right? I mean, we were discussing earlier. There's a lot of problems with people that are trying to rip off your work and stuff, but. You can call it inspiration sometimes, or sometimes you can say you just.
It's interesting. I think that legal side of of what happens as an artist, you don't protect your creation maybe in the same way, or you don't think about it. Mm-hmm. And I've heard lots of discussions, even the B-sides that we were in, with Shuzo, John Shioda, about they created a penguin that went on to get royalties, which was sort of an interesting concept.
Oh, they created a character.
Yes.
But then someone else owned the IP of it. Right?
They owned it. They retained it. It was kind of a genius move.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's still getting royalties 35 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to create something that still gets royalties.
Right? Yeah.
I think our industry, really, and maybe it's just because most people have an architectural background and not a business background, but most people don't think about the work they create in our industry as IP.
No.
It's something a client commissions and it doesn't belong to them anymore.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think we have a lot of problems in the industry.
I do, and I love the series that you're doing in CG Architect about the business.
Yeah, it's something that I think has been missing. The people, really experienced people that have built their businesses for 15, 20 years, talking about their challenges and how they structure their businesses and all of the things they've learned over time.
Well, just look, if you go back and listen to Norman Seif podcast a few years ago, but you know what? He actually holds the rights to every photograph that he takes. Right? Even if you commission him to do something, he says, "Great, but I still own the rights. You still have to license it."
I think photography is an excellent model.
Yes.
I think we should be following that model in our own industry.
That model, right? And photographers aren't necessarily very rich people. We should also admit that. But it is a model that we should look at, right? So we're creating content, we're creating stuff, and it's not just stuff that can be shared. The problem is, it's it's on Facebook. Well, it's free, right? It's
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting towards the end here, but I want to let people know a little bit where they can follow your work or see what you're doing. Obviously, I've known you when you started CG Architect, right?
Yeah, 2001. Yeah.
2001. So CGArchitect.com is the sort of place to see a lot of stuff that's going on in that field. And besides, obviously, news about ArchViz, what other stuff can you find on CG Architect?
Yes, I mean, we have a huge gallery, I think about 70,000 images that we've been collecting for the last 16 years, so we get hundreds of those every month, and we have a community on our forums, and I think the biggest thing that I'm most proud of is our 3D awards that we do every year. This was our 14th year, and we get people to submit from all over the world. We usually get around 4,000 submissions, and we recognize the top people in our industry, students and professionals, and people of all walks of life in the industry. So that's the best.
It's a really great award, and I remember it's been going on for quite a while now.
14 years.
14 years, yeah. So that's a great run. Absolutely. And what about you, Keely? Where can they find more information and some of the examples of the awesome company you've founded?
SIGGRAPH.com.
Mm-hmm.
Just plugging that.
Yeah.
So
and besides, obviously some amazing stills that you've done and some videos that you've done, you've also done some really interesting experimental work in AR that I don't even want to call it experimental because it just seems logical. Wow, that was a great idea for use for AR and VR stuff. So
we have a very talented team. So
you do have
awesome work.
Great team. So really appreciate it. All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.